Talking politics can be hard, but I'm going to give you 3 tools that may help you when it comes to political discourse. A lot of people seem to think that just using facts and figures and statistics will allow them to win political debates. This isn't true, because humans are not wholly rational or reasonable creatures. In fact, most human communication is framed in an emotional way. Because of this, if you want to convince someone that your political position is superior to theirs, you cannot simply frame it in a rational or reasoned way. You have to use certain tactics, the ones I'm going to go over here in a minute, in order to convince them. But first, before you employ any of these tactics, before you even talk with someone, you have to evaluate who they are as a person on the surface level. It's very helpful if you can establish right from the start what your opponent's position is on a certain topic beforehand so that you can reevaluate your strategy and apply it better depending on their positions. For example, if someone is ideologically opposed to you, you may have to completely shift your tactics in discussion. But if someone is closer to you ideologically, then you may only have to shift things up a little bit. And I'll explain a little bit more about that now. So, the most important tool that I use when I'm having a political discussion is framing. And framing is everything. Politics with the average person are not facts and figures, as I said. They are a moral framework. So what you need to do right off the bat, as soon as possible, is to establish a moral framework that puts you in a superior position. Now, you'll see this quite frequently when people try and take the high road on certain issues, claiming that they have moral superiority because of this position or that position, and it's very hard to argue against unless you can somehow reason with the person on a factual level. But it's very hard to do that with human beings sometimes. So what you need to do is frame your position as morally superior and your opponent's position as morally inferior. And you can use facts and reason and logic to do that in some cases, but for the most part, you're going to have to pull out the emotional card every now and again. And this is the main problem with modern day conservatives, the new right, the alt-right. They don't like to play this game. And that's why fundamentally they lose a lot of debates. With your average leftist, communist, left-wing socialist, those types, centrist, because they're trying to use reason and evidence in order to convince people of politics rather than emotion. And the average person runs off of 90% emotion and 10% reason. Now, also, when you're framing a discussion or an idea, frames have a beginning and an end. It comes full circle. So what you need to do is keep in your head or establish an end game. Why should someone believe your ideas? What is the purpose for what you are saying? When you're trying to convince someone of a political position, you need to almost herd them like an animal towards your end goal that you want. You want them to come to a conclusion sort of on their own, but you want to lead them there. So you need to have a beginning and end thought out, and then based on whatever you may be arguing with, you can fill in the middle between that. But you really need to lead people. And you can use emotions to lead people, like I said, with your moral framework. And if all else fails, if you're running out of things to do, or if you just want to sprinkle a little bit on top here, you can establish your position as intellectually superior. Now, leftists have done this for a very long time because there's lots of left-wing people in academia, so they constantly throw out the tired old position that, well, all of these intelligent people believe it, so it must be true or factual or the better position. And you can use that yourself if you really have to. Now, some people say that this is dirty or beneath you or dishonorable or things like that, but it really isn't, because your opponents are not going to grant you that. You are not in an honorable fight. You have to do what is necessary in order to gain the upper hand. Now, this doesn't mean betray your principles or lie about things, no, but you have to either mask your intentions or frame your argument in a certain way, lead people to the conclusions that you want them to reach, use a little bit of emotion rather than just pure reason and evidence, because, as I said, human nature prevents the average person from really using reason and objectivity to come to a conclusion all of the time. Now, the second tool that I use all of the time is perception, and perception is a very strong tool. I would suggest going back and watching my human perception and politics video in order to get a little bit more understanding of this when it comes to image in particular. But when we're talking about perception in a discussion, you have to subvert the expectations of your opponent. You have to warp your image to fit what the other person wants to see. Being overtly hostile or fitting into a stereotype that the other person may have about your position will only close their mind to your ideas. So you have to be a little bit sneaky and a little bit deceitful in your image when you present them something. What I really mean by this is do not box yourself or your position into a stereotype if possible. You should not willingly give your opponent ammunition that's going to be used to tear down your position or your argument. Now, lastly, you need to intentionally mask your intentions or ideas until you establish a relationship with the person you're talking to. You need to sort of butter them up a little bit. You need to find common ground that you can agree on, because this will open them up to your conclusions about whatever idea that you may have. If you and your opponent or the person you're talking to can agree on A, B, and C, they're more open to accepting a more radical position that is D. This is especially useful when you're talking to someone who you already know, friends, family, things like that. They're already more willing to hear you out if you're in a position of mutual respect or in a relationship with them. They're more open to the ideas that you may have. So it's, at least I think, to establish some kind of relationship with this person that you're talking to, or build off of the relationship that you have previously, because this will allow you to put your foot in the door of their mind and slip in all of your ideas as you go forward. This also ties into the idea I said earlier, which is to establish an end game. Lead the person to a conclusion, but then let them come to that conclusion themselves. Now, lastly, just another smaller tool that I employ occasionally, and that's wording. Wording, I think, is something that's overlooked. Now, what you need to do is you need to use your opponent's words against them in order to trigger subconscious reactions. For example, if your opponent starts using anti-white vitriol or talking points, tell them that they should stop using slurs, because the word slur is commonly used by leftists to put down their political opponents. It's an emotional buzzword that they use in order to try and tear you down. And it also virtue signals to the other leftists that they all have something in common, that they're all being virtuous. You need to use this moral framework against them. And like I said, it triggers a subconscious reaction when they hear those words, because they're exposed to them so frequently in their own little circles that they have. So if you start talking like them, they're more likely to think subconsciously that you're on their side, thus allowing you to interject your ideas into their heads. And on that same note, what you need to do is refrain from using your own ideological buzzwords. For example, if you're a libertarian or an anarcho-capitalist and you're arguing with a statist, let's say communist or someone center-left or something like that, try and refrain from using the word the free market or the invisible hand or things like that, because they've probably already heard it all before. It is a buzzword that's going to trigger a mental block in the opponent's head when you start talking about that particular topic. You're more than likely going to get the rolled eyes look, hands, arms crossed, that type of barricade that you're going to now have to tear down in order to reestablish the relationship that you had with that person. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much it. I use those 3 tools in order to convince people of my political positions, and it's worked out fairly well for me so far. So if you'd like to try it out next time you have a conversation, just a quick note, though, if you're not familiar or if you haven't had that many political discussions, go on YouTube and look up those videos where a person with a camera and a microphone goes to like a protest or a rally and starts interviewing people. You can see lots of good tactics and bad tactics used to show people or convince people of a certain political position. One of the videos that I really enjoyed many years ago was this one where a guy, I think, was going to one of those minimum wage rallies or something, and he was asking people about the Federal Reserve, but he started off asking them, hey, do you know what a Federal Reserve note is? And when they said no, he would pull out a US green dollar and show them. And they said, oh, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. So he establishes a relationship. He gets in there. He doesn't trying to demean them or tear them down. He doesn't start out with, an ideological speech or anything like that. It's a very good interview. If I can find it, I'll put it in the description, or if you can find the link, put it in the comment section down below. That's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching.